Finally, Honkai Star Rail version 3.0 has been released. And as we know, there are a lot of super interesting updates in this version, such as new stories, new events, new characters, and one of the most important is the new Trailblazer Path, the Remembrance Path. Is the Remembrance Trailblazer more powerful than the Harmony Trailblazer? Well, that seems to be the question on the minds of everyone playing Honkai Star Rail right now. This is quite understandable, because as we know, Harmony Trailblazer has had a very big influence on the meta in Honkai Star Rail in the past, because thanks to this character, the Superbreak team meta was finally born in version 2, which ultimately changed the whole team meta. This makes everyone's expectations for Trailblazer's new path very high, doesn't it? So without further ado, I'm Hoyo Station and we will talk about the full guide to Remembrance Trailblazer version 3.0. Let's do this! Do you have a character or weapon in the game that you really want but you don't have enough Stellar Jades? Here's a smarter way to recharge your favorite games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Look no further than Lootbar. Lootbar is the most reliable top-up platform. It saves up to 20% for all orders compared with the official channel, and it provides an 80% off for your first purchase. It's 100% safe as you will only be using your UID. We will buy pack for 3000 Stellar Jades for $42, which otherwise would have costed $50. Totally saving $7.5. We received the crystals we purchased in the last than 3 minutes. All recharges will be done through the official channel with MiHoYo, which allows you to enjoy all top-up offers. Ready to level up your gaming experience? Check the link in the description to get the amazing discount. As with some of the previous characters, we will start by discussing Remembrance Trailblazer's base stats. Remembrance Trailblazer or RMC has some pretty good base stats, with 1042 HP, 543 attack, 630 defense, 103 speed, and 160 energy. In fact, in some parts of his stats, such as his defense and speed, he is slightly behind Harmony Trailblazer, who has a slightly higher stat. Well, following the trend of several characters that will be released in version 3.0, RMC also has a fairly high energy capacity, which is 160 energy, which means he has a higher energy capacity than Sunday, who has a fairly similar role. But don't worry guys, like the third task kit that I talked about before, a high energy capacity means that he has a certain way of getting energy in his kit faster. Just like Aglaya, which was released in version 3.0, Remembrance Trailblazer or RMC has a MEMOSPRITE called Mem. This MEMOSPRITE is shaped like a cute little pink monster. This MEMOSPRITE will help the Remembrance Trailblazer in battle. One thing to note here is that Mem has a very high taunt value, which is 100 points. This means that she has a slightly higher chance of being attacked by enemies than some characters on certain paths, such as Erudition and Hunt. For the Mem skill called Bad is Trouble, when used, it gives 10 energy to Trailblazer and 4 times damage to the enemy, with each of its damage dealing ice damage equal to 36% of Mem's attack to a random enemy, and on the next attack, it will deal ice damage worth 90% of Mem's attack to all enemies. Now, if you break this kit down a little bit, Mem's skill will actually deal AoE damage to all enemies, but the multiplier generated on each enemy will be different because the damage dealt to the enemy will be very random. But if you do a little math here, on average, this skill will produce 118.8% ice damage on all enemies, which is quite good, maybe even on par with the skills of some Erudition characters. Then for the second kit that we will be discussing here is MEMOSPRITE's talent called Friends Together. This talent will increase the critical damage of all team members by 12% of Mem's critical damage and by 18%. Okay, so the buff that Mem gets from this talent is a little less than the critical damage buff that Sunday gets from his ultimate, which can add up to 30% of his critical damage. But remember that the buff given by this talent is universal buff, which means that this buff is more effective when there are several characters with DPS roles, compared to Sunday's buff, which is more suited to teams that rely on hyper carry units. Doing a little math here, if we have at least 200% critical damage, then we will be able to provide an additional 42% critical damage to the entire team. Interesting, right? Speaking of interesting, did you know that the addition of critical damage also increases the Sunday buff? Yes, with the critical damage buff given to all team members, Sunday's critical damage will increase, and with the increase in Sunday's critical damage, the critical damage buff that comes from Ultimate Sunday will also increase. Cool, isn't it? As well as providing good buffs, this talent also has other effects. When the charge is not at 100%, Mem will automatically issue a Baddie's Trouble when it's her turn. If Mem's charge is already 100%, she will immediately get a turn and use the skill called Let Me Help You on the next turn. Next, for the second talent owned by Mem called Go Mem Go, the effect is that when called into battle by RMC, Mem will immediately get 50% charge. Now for this talent, it seems quite clear. This talent makes Mem already have at least 50% charge when she starts the battle, so she can issue her main skill faster, which I will explain in a few moments. Then for Mem's last talent, called No Regrets, it can give a 25% action boost to the Trailblazer when Mems disappears in battle. Well, that's actually quite good, but to be honest, if she never disappears in battle, this effect will never activate. It's a bit inconvenient actually. Finally, we come to Mem's interesting kit called Let Me Help You. Honestly, this skill has a pretty interesting effect, guys. When we use this skill, we can give one of our team members an advanced action of 100% and that team member will get a buff called Mem Support for 3 turns. Each time, the damage caused by the owner of this buff will cause special damage, called True Damage, equal to 28% of the character's original damage. Now, this is very interesting set. This skill can give a 100% action boost to an ally, which is of course very similar to some existing units, namely Sunday and Bronya. But the fundamental difference between this kit and the existing kits is that Mem's action advance comes from enhanced skills, or what you could call her ultimate. So the frequency of this effect will be less than the units I mentioned before. As for the next part, Mem Support, this is a buff that really goes beyond reason, folks. In fact, at first glance, the addition of this damage is similar to the ultimate effect that Robin has, where Robin deals extra damage to the characters in the team every time a member of the team attacks. However, the difference is that the damage Robin deals is fixed damage, unlike Mem Support, which can adjust its damage to match the damage dealt by the character. The more damage our character deals, the more true damage he deals. Interesting, right? Okay, now we move on to RMC's skill called I Choose You. This skill will summon Mem to the battlefield. If Mem is already in the field, it will restore 60% of Mem's maximum HP and give 10% of the charge. All in all, I personally think this set is pretty good, guys. It can restore Mem's HP with a large enough amount. Plus, this skill does not force us to use it every turn, making this character not a negative SP unit. And next we will talk about his ultimate, which is called Together Mem. This ultimate will summon the MEMOSPRITE into the battle, give it 40% charge, then make Mem attack the enemy with ice damage worth 240% of Mem's attack to all enemies. Well, obviously RMC is not a DPS, so in this ultimate you cannot expect huge damage from this set, because as we can see in the base stats section, his attack is quite low compared to other characters, especially characters that have a role as a DPS. So we can assume that the damage produced will not be as great as the existing DPS. But the damage from this attack is quite helpful when fighting large numbers of enemies or in pure friction mode. But the thing to note here is the provision of a 40% charge that can speed up Mem to be able to give a buff called Mem Support to one of the allies in the team. With this buff, our damage output can increase rapidly. Next up is another interesting talent called Almighty Companion. This talent has two very interesting effects. The first is MEMOSPRITE Mem will have 130 speed and a maximum HP equal to 80% of Trailblazer's maximum HP plus 640 points. As for the second effect of this talent, for every 10 energy generated by all allies in the party, Mem will get 1% charge. Okay, we will try to discuss this effect one by one. For the first effect, Mem will have a fixed speed of 130 points and an HP of 80% of Trailblazer's maximum HP plus 640 points. This means that Trailblazer will get more benefits if he has a high HP status. As a simulation, if we have 4000 HP, then Mem will have a HP that is pretty much equal to RMC's maximum HP, which is 3840 points. Also, by having a large HP, the HP recovery from RMC's skill will also be greater, because the amount of HP recovery that will be generated will be calculated with the maximum amount of HP, and that is, of course, a good thing. As for the second effect of this talent, there's another interesting thing we should discuss, As you know, for every 10 energy generated by all allies in the team, Mem gets 1% charge. This means that if there are kits on certain characters that can produce more energy, then the effect of this talent will be maximized. Some examples of kits that can maximize this talent are the Herta's kit on her trace called I Lovely Honest and also Message from Beyond the Veil. These two traces can synergize well with RMC's talents, as both effects provide an additional 3 energy each time a member of our party attacks an enemy target. So the combination of the Herta and RMC will be a pretty good combination in the upcoming patch. Aside from these two kits, there are other characters that can synergize with this talent, such as Yunli. Yunli has a talent called Flash Forge, which gives 15 energy every time Yunli receives an attack from the enemy. So the combination of Yunli and RMC can also be an interesting combination for you to try. Okay, next we are going to talk about his technique called Memories Back as Echoes. After using this technique, we will create a dimension that will last for 10 seconds. Enemies in this dimension will stop moving and go into a time stop state. After entering the battle, when fighting enemies affected by time stop, it will delay enemy attacks by 50% and produce a true damage equal to 100% of Trailblazer's attack. Now, this technique is pretty good for delaying the enemy's turn at the beginning of the game, so our team has a better chance of getting a turn before the enemy. In addition, this technique will also provide true damage to all existing enemies. So even though Trailblazer is not a character with a DPS role, the damage generated by this technique is quite helpful to get a good start in the battle. Finally, we come to RMC's traces, and as usual, we will try to talk a little about his minor traces. In RMC's minor traces, he gets additional bonus stats of 37.3% critical damage, 14% attack, and 14% HP. Now, these 3 stats are important stats to have when building this character. As we know, the higher the critical damage status, the higher the critical damage buff that Mem will give you through her talent. In addition to the attack status, well, this status is very useful for increasing the ability of the damage output he produces, because even though RMC has many kits that can provide buffs to other party members, there are some kits that still deal damage to enemies, such as his ultimate or his technique that we just discussed. What about HP? I think HP also plays a very important role, because as I explained in other parts of this video, the higher the HP of RMC, the higher the HP of Mem. Very good, right? Okay, now we are going to discuss RMC's trace 1 called Rhapsody's Scepter. The effect of this trace is that when the Trailblazer starts the fight, he gets a 30% action advance. And when Mem first enters the battle, she immediately gets a 35% charge. Well, to be honest, when I first read this kit, I thought it was a pretty interesting kit. Why? First of all, with this first trace, RMC will have a high probability of getting an early turn compared to all existing characters, even enemies. Because as we know, RMC's technique can already delay enemy actions by 50%. So it's likely that the enemy will not have the first turn, plus an additional 30% action at the beginning of the battle. Especially if you give RMC a high enough speed, then it's certain that he will get the fastest turn. Then for the second trace effect, Mem will get 35% charge for the first time she enters the battle. This is very good effect, guys. You will recall that Mem already has a MEMOSPRITE talent called Go Mem Go, which gives 50% charge when called into battle. Yes, if we combine Mem's talent and RMC, she already has 85% charge at the start of the battle. This means that she only needs 15% charge to use her best kit. Let me help you. If we do a little math, Mem gets 1% charge for every 10 energy generated by allies, which means that we can easily get to a 15% charge deficit by using 5 skills on the existing ally, as 15% charge is equivalent to 150 energy, or 5 times the skill of an average character. Next is the second trace called Pettit Parable. When Mem uses the skill called Betty's Trouble, Mem will receive a 5% charge. Well, this is a pretty good trace and a source of extra charge other than talents owned by RMC. Next, we will discuss the most interesting of his 3 traces, the third one called Magnets and Long Chains. If the maximum energy capacity of a team member who has the MEM support buff exceeds 100 energy, then for every 10 energy above that, the true damage generated by MEM support will increase by 2% up to a maximum 20%. Okay, in short, this is a very good trace. If we do a little math here, if we want to maximize the effect of this trace, we need to give a buff called MEM support to characters who have at least 200 energy. Well, to be honest, there are very few characters with that much energy at the moment. However, some characters that currently have that much energy are the Herta and also Yunli. Yes, both of these characters have quite a large energy capacity. The Herta with 220 energy and Yunli with 240 energy. So clearly, these two characters will be able to maximize this trace well with an additional true damage of 48% at level 10. Finally, we come to the discussion of RMC's Eidolons. Eidolon 1, called Narrator of the Present, has the effect that team members who receive the MEM support buff will receive an additional 10% critical rate. Yes, for Eidolon, this will certainly reminds us of Sunday's Kid, which can provide a similar buff, right? Of course, this is not a bad thing, quite the opposite. Since we can get all of RMC's Eidolons, we will definitely get that Eidolon 1 effect in this patch. This means that if we combine Sunday and RMC in the same party, our hyper carry characters will get an additional 30% critical rate. What's even better is that this effect also applies to characters that have a MEMOSPRITE. So if there are future characters that have a MEMOSPRITE, such as Aglaya, then Aglaya and her MEMOSPRITE will get the same critical rate increase buff. Interesting, isn't it? Next, RMC's Eidolon 2 is called Glider of the Past. When another MEMOSPRITE in the team takes an action, RMC will immediately gain 8 energy. This effect can be triggered once per turn and will be reset when it's RMC's turn. Now, Eidolon's 2 effect is also quite interesting to discuss. With Eidolon's effect, it's quite clear that RMC will also be very useful when combined with other characters that have a Remembrance Path that depends on MEMOSPRITE. This means that characters like Aglaya will have more benefits when their MEMOSPRITE initiates an action. With the addition of energy, which is quite big, it's clear that RMC will find it very easy to unleash his ultimate, and automatically the buff from MEM's enhanced skill will trigger more often. Will Aglaya be the best combination for RMC? Spare comments in the comments section down below. The next effect of Eidolon 4 is called Dancer of the Muse. When a member of our party who has a maximum energy capacity of 0 unleashes an ability, the MEM will also get a 3% charge. And if that character produces true damage from MEM support, then the damage will increase by 6% again. Now, someone might be confused here. What does 0 energy capacity mean? The purpose of this Eidolon 4 effect is for a character who does not use energy based for their ultimate and uses other mechanism for their ultimate, such as Akron and Wei Xiao. Honestly, although these two are not the best characters to be paired with RMC, it seems that with Eidolon 4 effect, somehow, characters without the concept of energy can also be paired with RMC. Although the true damage increase given will not be the maximum because the true damage increase of RMC must be based on the maximum amount of energy capacity. Still, this is an interesting Eidolon that can make RMC universally usable. And finally, the last one is Eidolon 6, called Bearer of Revelation, which can increase critical rate by 100% when RMC uses ultimate. Now, this is another interesting Eidolon. There are 2 things we can conclude from this Eidolon. The first is that RMC's ultimate will do quite a bit of damage with the effect of this Eidolon. And the second is that RMC is increasingly losing the reason to use critical rate status on his build, because he already has 100% critical rate even if it's only on his ultimate. Okay, the next discussion we need to have is about RMC build. As we know, the RMC has a very simple role and mechanic, which is to act as a support that provides buffs to party members while also providing some attacks to enemies on some of his sets. Currently, there are 2 types of sets you can use. One is the Hero of Triumphant Song. This relic is one of the best relics he can use. The effect of this relic fits perfectly with RMC's set, as it can increase speed by 6%, and when the MEMOSPRITE attacks, it increases the critical damage of the user and the MEMOSPRITE by 30% for 2 turns. Now, since Mem has a set that increases her critical damage based on her stats, the 30% critical damage increase is also quite helpful. Then, for the second set you can use 2 types of relic combos that can increase speed. namely relics called Messenger Traversing Hackerspace and also Secredo's Relieved Ordeal. If you want to build your RMC with high speed, then these two relics are also very good to consider. Then we move on to the area of planar ornament suitable for RMC use. At the moment, there is a pretty good set of planar ornaments that you can use, namely Lushaka, the Sunken Seas. Why are these suitable for RMC? Well, the answer is quite simple, because RMC will always be paired with a character with a DPS role in the team. So the effect of this planar ornament will be able to help increase the character's attack. In addition, the RMC really needs the energy regeneration rate to be able to increase the energy he receives. So adding 5% through this planar ornament will obviously be very helpful. And next, for the status recommendations that you should use for RMC are as follows. And what about the light cone that is suitable for RMC? To be honest, there aren't many light cones that he can use at the moment, because RMC has a relatively new Remembrance Path, so the best choice at the moment is the light cone called Victory in a Blink. This light cone has an effect that fits perfectly with RMC's kit. It can increase critical damage, and if the user's MEMOSPRITE uses the ability to ally, it will increase the damage generated by the ally. Pretty good, isn't it? In addition, this light cone is quite free-to-play friendly, as it can be easily obtained through the store. Finally, we come to the last discussion in this video, which is the best characters and teams to pair with RMC. As we know, RMC is a support character with a very good buff type. However, even though he is a very universal support character, not all characters can be paired well with him, as he has some restricted kits that need to be fulfilled. The first character to be paired with RMC is none other than the Herta. As I said before, RMC can provide maximum buffs if the character receiving the buff has an energy capacity of over 200 points and can generate energy easily. And all these requirements can be met by the Herta. Yes, the Herta has a high capacity of 220 points and can generate additional energy from her traces. So clearly, this character is going to be one of those characters that works well with RMC. As for the second character that works very well with RMC, it's Yunli. Yes, as we know, just like Herta, Yunli has a very high energy capacity, even higher than Herta, which is 240 points. So the buff from RMC will be able to give Yunli its best potential. Yunli also has a kit that can give her extra energy every time she receives an enemy attack. This makes her ideal for use with RMC. Okay, so the third character that I personally think is very well suited to being paired with RMC is Acheron. Yeah, Acheron. Why? Because not only can RMC be paired with characters that have a lot of energy, RMC can also be paired with characters that have a maximum of 0 energy. Which means he can also be paired with Acheron. Although not the best pairing, the combination between these two characters is quite good when used. Okay guys, we've talked everything about RMC. Now it's time to talk about the best teammates for RMC. You can see the different team combinations for RMC on your screen. RMC is actually a very universal support character that can be used with a variety of character combinations. Some characters may not be able to get the most out of his buff, but overall, RMC provides a pretty good buff for the whole character. Okay guys, maybe that's it for this video. What do you think? If there's anything else you'd like to ask, please drop a line in the comments section down below. And don't forget to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video.